Well, did you bring your party hat, Gary?
No.
It is episode 100
Wow.
of Curiosity, Not Judgment. Welcome. So glad to have you listening in.
And I am grateful,
I am too.
and this is a good thing.
It is a good thing. It's kind of mind-boggling, 100 episodes. And if you really start to do the math on that, we've been at this for 2+ years. And I think at the beginning of this, we didn't quite know where things were going to go. And now being able to look back over 100 episodes, 100 weeks, the life changes that we've walked through personally, professionally, all of the things that have transpired, man, I would say we're in a vastly different place than we were during episode 1.
No question. And with all the changes that have happened in our world and in government and healthcare and COVID and the way we work, the way that people go to offices or don't anymore,
Yep.
a lot has changed. AI,
Oh, yeah.
right? So, yeah, a lot has changed in the world, which is not surprising. We
No.
could have predicted a lot of change. I don't know that we would have predicted we'd still be doing this 100 episodes in.
Yeah. I think one thing that hasn't changed is I'm looking at our backdrop of these wooden doors.
That's
Is
true.
we've been, for the most part, sitting in your kitchen. And so we have been talking about, Gary and I have been talking about what comes next. How do we modify the podcast? Do we modify the podcast? Do we change things up? Do we keep it the same? And so wanted to have a little bit of conversation around that because we are practically coming towards the year's end. We are going to take the last week of December off and just have a little lull week. So no new episode the last Wednesday of December. But we are really contemplating what does the future hold for us in this genre? What happens for us, as we consider any changes that we might want to make for this medium.
So those are ground level or 10,000, 30,000 foot questions. Taking us back up to 100,000 foot, it's always good. And I think most of us are reminded at the end of the year to take stock
Yes.
in what's working well, what isn't working well, what should I stop, what should I start, what should I continue doing into the new year and next year. Some of us make New Year's resolutions around that. Some of us write down our goals, review our goals from last year, try to hold ourselves accountable to what's going on in our lives. You and I both agree that we want this to be useful.
Absolutely.
And we want it to be something that is valuable to people. I think it was Edison or somebody said, I never want to invent something that nobody wants.
Sure.
And so, what can we do, and we'd love to hear your feedback on this, what can we do to make it more useful, right? Shorter, longer, different venue, tired of the wood doors. What is it that would be useful? What is the format good? Should we start with a question? Should we generally start with a topic and then kind of riff on that. There's no speech writers here. There's nobody writing content. There's nobody, show prep for us is not hours and hours of research and writing and making sure that we hit these points. I think you've noticed we never look down at our notes and say, oh, what was the thing I wanted to bring up next?
Right. And me just coughing, and it's not going to get edited out because it's just not going to happen right now.
We don't have a cough button.
No. But I mean, I think to that point, we are really considering what makes the most sense moving forward. For those of you that listen to numerous podcasts, I'm sure you hear a wide variety of sound quality. You'll have some with, well-polished, produced intros, some with music that run underneath. Some are 5 minutes long, some are an hour and a half long, and there's validity in all of the different approaches, and it appeals to different types of audiences. But I think what we wanted to say was, you, our audience, what would be most beneficial to you? And, keeping in mind, there are going to be some things that we can comply with. We want to hear the feedback, but we aren't going to be able to make everyone happy. But certainly want to hear, would a 7 or a 10-minute podcast serve you better than the standard 25-minute format that we're doing? Do you want to see us in a studio and have this be more polished? And if so, That might mean that we need to pay for someone to edit. And then does that mean you add advertisements into a podcast? And all of these things that we have to consider moving forward. So really, we wanted this to be an episode for you to be curious about what it is that you would really like out of this type of a forum, and then for us to be curious to hear your feedback. The quickest way to always get feedback to us is either to make a comment on the YouTube channel. I can absolutely get that in a heartbeat, but you can also contact us by way of filling out a form, which gets to us by email, and that's just right at our website, curiositynotjudgment.com.
So what would be the way that this could be more useful to each of our audience members, not only in the form of video and audio as we're doing now, but is there some written form? Is there some points that, an outline, show notes, those kinds of things?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be useful? As we start really contemplating writing some of this down into chapter and verse into a book, what are the kinds of, what's the kind of books that people, read out there?
Mm-hmm.
Are you somebody who loves a 500-page novel? Would you rather have what we used to call an airport book, something you can pick up at an airport and read on 1 or 2 flights as you go? Reading versus audio
Mm-hmm.
versus a
Video,
conversation, people have strong opinions and people have strong
Certainly.
needs around which even media they like.
Yeah. I've mentioned in the past that it's really difficult for me to gauge who our audience is. I couldn't tell you if we've got a bunch of 13-year-old listening. I don't think that's the case. If it's people that are 60 plus, if it's all ethnicities, if it's mostly men, I really have very little understanding of who comprises our audience. And so it's hard to make assumptions about what might be most beneficial. So your feedback is absolutely critical to us. So again, that quick point of communication with us is just the website, curiositynotjudgment.com, or please do leave a message on the YouTube channel. And of course, just because we are people, we do ask for it to be respectful. You don't have to agree with everything that we do, but we just ask for dialogue that you would have with somebody face to face, and not just throw, mean phrases out there. If you say, I hate this podcast, I get nothing out of it. Well, power to you. You're welcome to find something else.
But I just have a tendency to say, what are some of the curious questions you can ask around any process or any activity that you're doing right now, and how do you cut things? I'm one of those people that say yes a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so I tend to accumulate things. I very rarely stop doing things, and so how do you look at things, activities in your life, and know when to modify them, when to fix them? The title of that book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, always comes to my mind. At what point do you pivot? At what point do you have a different focus? At what point do you do something a little bit different? Or do you just say, hey, this is working, don't change a thing?
Mm-hmm. We've mentioned this in the past, but when we set out on this journey, the intention was to write a book. It was never to start a podcast. But because of your very busy travel schedule, and because it was difficult to sit down and actually have screen time typing stuff out, we wanted there to be an opportunity for some content generation that didn't require lots of typing and editing. And so the notion of this podcast was birthed. And it turns out it's been really fulfilling for me. I think we have some very enriching conversations. And I would imagine that many of the subject matters that we approach are things that are common to our fellow human beings that they walk through in different different times of their lives. And so the idea is really how do we genuinely be curious in our own lives? How do we help extend some of those curious questions to you so that you in turn can be curious in your own life? And just within this last week or two, I know that you had a opportunity to have some conversation with a book author that we both respect. And there was a statement in there that you sent over to me that I thought, oh, how interesting that is. Maybe this is kind of the phrase that we need to ponder as we're at episode 100. And maybe we weren't ready for a book before now.
Yeah, and I mean, we've said this on the podcast many times. everybody's in their own journey, and we need to be respectful of different people's journeys and different seasons. And some people start their first book when they're 55 and end up writing 30 books, and all of them happen after age 60. And some people start a writing career early, right? And so why this hasn't produced a book yet, I think, is a good question to answer. But and the person we're talking about is Jeremy Kubicek, who's written many books. His latest one is called The Communication Code, and it's really good, and it has to do with how people communicate, and the fact that as you send something, the receiver has to be ready to receive in a way that makes sense to them, and it's really good. But anyway, he says that in order how to write a book, one, you have to live it. Two, if you live it, then you can create a powerful outline of how it has already worked. And then three, then add the stories and get partners to work with you. And I mean, those three things were, when I read them, attractive and obvious to me. I just hadn't seen them articulated so well. And I know for you too. And so, at what point do we take our lived stories, our lived experiences, and write them down? We have plenty of material. Could we package that material and articulate it in a way that's useful to a broad number of people? I think that's the question.
In looking back at my life and my, raising my children and walking through different careers and all of these things, I think I would have said, of course I'm a curious person. Of course I want to know all of these different things. And that's a very easy statement to say, thinking, about yourself. But as I have discovered during the course of this 100 episodes, to pause in the moment when something is right in front of you and to be intentional about your curiosity and to ask those questions, those are two very different things. And so to the point of Jeremy Kubicek's list about you have to live it, I do feel that I have made an honest attempt to live this out the last 2+ years. As you have people in your lives and shifting business and shifting relationships, there is inevitably those pain points. And if in that moment you can purpose to shift your way of thinking into one of curiosity, that to me is that lived experience. And so, perhaps I wasn't curious in the right way, or curious in the way that we are communicating prior to embarking upon this adventure.
There's no question that I'm more curious now than when we started. And, the old saying of, if you point at someone, you've got three fingers pointing back at you, right? Yeah. This has absolutely helped in my growth over the time, and being more curious, because like you, I thought I was a fairly curious person, and but then I realized, and this is true of any time you study something, you realize, okay, yeah, I used to label myself as this, but as I look at it, look how far I could go further than this, and there's always progress to be made in life, and life is a series of progresses, but. Am I more curious now? Absolutely. Do I think of the word curiosity differently now? I do. And I think that a lot of us feel like we try to be open-minded towards things and try to not have set judgments about things, and that we want to stay curious. But I think putting that into practice and exercising that muscle and actually doing it on a daily basis can be something that is life transforming. And I'd love to be able to share that part of this.
Absolutely.
Is a book the right way to do it? Is that only done one-on-one? How do we accomplish that?
Personal coaching.
Yeah.
I suppose there's lots of different things that could be birthed out of this. So, so for our episode 100, we want to put it back to you and say, what are your thoughts? We're curious about where you stand. We're curious about what would most fuel you and what would most benefit you. So I guess we're asking two different things. First off, format of the podcast. Do you like the length? Do you want it longer? Do you want it shorter? Do you want it produced differently? Again, can't please all of you, but would love to hear your feedback. And then if we transition into a secondary venue, whether that be authorship or, coaching or some other sort of approach, what would you find most helpful? What is most necessary for you in your curious journey? And so, again, just a fabulous way to reach out to us is either comments on the YouTube channel or through the Curiosity Not Judgment.com website. Let me try that again. CuriosityNotJudgment.com. That's the website. And then there's opportunity to contact us, which just goes directly to our email.
So appreciate your feedback, and we'll be brainstorming some different things that we could do and different ways to put these ideas out there, and because we still believe that they're useful and can help in individuals' growth journeys. So
yeah. So we will wish you a marvelous end of 2023. And we will take that pause for the last week of December, but be looking forward to our time back together for a fresh new calendar year. And we will encourage you to stay curious.
Happy 2023 and happy 2024.